SIMUCUBE firmware versus MMOS. Welcome back to the Game of Muscle YouTube channel. It's time for a direct drive wheel video. Now, I don't want to bamboozle people that don't have direct drive wheels or don't quite know what they are. So first things first, this does not apply to wheels like the G29 or the T300 or the Fanatec wheels. This is specifically for open sim wheels that use a SIMUCUBE controller board. This is also going to be even more confusing because there's going to be direct drive wheels coming out that this won't apply to as well. There's the 7 Newton meter Simplicity wheel coming out. This won't apply to that. The AccuForce wheel, which is a direct drive wheel, this doesn't apply to that. Ignore. And the Fanatec direct drive wheel, this doesn't apply to that. Ignore. Ignore, everybody ignore. But if you've got a SIMUCUBE box that controls a direct drive wheel, then indeed this does apply to you. And many of those people with SIMUCUBE direct drive wheels will actually have already moved to the SIMUCUBE firmware and will be thinking to themselves, why didn't you move to it before Game of Muscle? Well, SIMUCUBE owners, I didn't want to be changing software because MMOS actually works really well for the most part. And with us doing streaming and jumping from game to game, if things are working, I generally like to keep them the same because there's so many things that can break. Believe me, it will break, and it will break at the worst possible time. Regardless of that though, last night while streaming we decided to install the SIMUCUBE firmware, give it a blast on iRACING, and well, here we are with our first impressions and my feedback of the differences between using the SIMUCUBE firmware and MMOS in terms of how it actually affects the force feedback feel. We've been focusing mostly on iRACING because I'd literally just gone from MMOS, done some driving in iRACING, installed the software, and then did another race with the SIMUCUBE firmware. So it was fresh in my mind what it felt like. So here we go. But just before I tell you what I feel and what I thought, if you are going to upgrade the software, don't be worried. It's not actually very complicated. I thought it'd be a lot harder than it was. It literally is just a case of grabbing one file and copying it across, possibly installing a USB driver. It shouldn't take you more than 15 minutes. And what I highly recommend doing is going to the YouTube channel. I can't read it. His name is spelled Mtakala 82. Mtakala 82. It's me, Luigi. Matila 82. I don't know. That's the voice in my head. But go to his channel, and he's just got a video showing what he did. He had to install USB drivers to get his to be detected. But it's all very clear. It'll be fine. Don't worry. So, first impressions of the SIMUCUBE software. Is it worth upgrading to it over MMOS? Yes it is. What's the most noticeable difference in the force feedback over MMOS? I say the biggest difference is due to the SIMUCUBE force reconstruction filter, and what that seems to do is, in a very good and efficient way, makes the force feedback feel generally smoother, a little bit more concise, though paradoxically, because if you turn that force filter up, it'll actually make it less concise. But if set up correctly, makes things feel a little bit more concise, removes the overactive nature of what can be inherent to direct drive wheels a lot better than in MMOS. You generally have to fiddle around quite a lot with the dampening and just sort of work it from car to car to get something that's ideal. But bearing in mind, though, for those of you that don't have direct drive wheels, even in MMOS, even if you don't fiddle with it, it's on another world better without fiddling than any consumer wheel, let's be clear there. But the difference you do notice with the SIMUCUBE firmware versus MMOS is that you could just set the force reconstruction to 4, for example, and put 1% dampening or 0.5% dampening, and that's it. It'll feel pretty damn good with no real oscillation issues and what have you, especially if you tick the anti-oscillation button in iRACING. So the end result is you end up with the force feedback just feeling more sort of rubbery, if that makes sense, smoother, less sort of grainy. iRACING with MMOS felt a little bit grainy unless you really fiddle with the dampening settings. But with the SIMUCUBE software, it doesn't feel grainy at all. It feels perfectly smooth and really nice and rubbery. And then the cars themselves, the self-aligning, which is what iRACING particularly does really well, and that's the back end of the car. The nature of the car to correct the back end of the car, if that makes sense. Ultimately, at a fundamental level, I would say the difference between MMOS and SIMUCUBE, after a little bit of fiddling with SIMUCUBE, and I've obviously had MMOS for a while, the sort of tangible difference would be about a sort of 10-15% improvement. Which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's enough to say, really, you want to be using SIMUCUBE rather than MMOS. I don't want to slag off MMOS because it works with everything pretty much. It functions great, it does the job, you wouldn't be disappointed with it, and the guy that programmed it's insane, and we all owe him a debt of gratitude and a shrine. We should build a shrine to the guy that programmed it in all cities. Should actually be like the Eiffel Tower, but just the guy that programmed MMOS, because he was the first person to really do something that allowed people to use direct drive wheels and made it very easy to access all the options and what have you. But times have changed, we all move on, it's time for SIMUCUBE. Now, the other really nice thing with the SIMUCUBE software is the interface on it is really nice and clean. It's very similar to the MMOS interface. You'll be familiar with the stuff, the dampening settings, the friction, the inertia. You've also got the direct input effect settings, which you just don't really use. And then, of course, the force reconstruction filter, which I say is probably the key one for getting the smoothness, along with the torque bandwidth limit, which we've just left on 1,000 hertz. Because that worked well, that's what the default was, and I'll fiddle with stuff more in the future, but with these settings it was all hunky-dory and great. Now, in terms of actual features that are different that you don't have in MMOS, or not the same degree of control, the bump stop settings you can adjust a bit better. One of the big things I found with the direct drive wheel is not having a really harsh bump stop for the end of the rotation, because what can happen is if you hit the bump stop, the wheel can sort of bounce off it and go a little bit crazy. Really nicely in the SIMUCUBE software, you can set a bump stop maximum strength, which is what you could do in MMOS, but you can also set a bump stop effect ramp rage. Ramp rage is what happens when a guy in a wheelchair is really angry because the ramp to the building is too steep. Ramp range, on the other hand, allows you to control how it ramps up in strength when you hit the bump stop, and then you've got a bump stop damping effect, which dampens the bump stop, which is it's all really nice. I've got mine set up 40-20-10, and basically means that you don't get that oscillation if you hit the bump stop. You could kind of get around it by making it less powerful in MMOS, as I say, but you know, you can do it in this a little bit more precisely, which is always nice. But to be honest, I think the biggest thing with the SIMUCUBE, as I say, it just seems to make the general force feedback oscillation issue improved. The cars in iRACING, and I briefly tried Assetto Corsa, just feel a little bit more calm. Like the force feedback feels a little bit calmer while still being super concise and super tight. Not overactive is probably how I'd describe it. And it's been a problem with direct drive was there can be a little bit overactive. ADD force feedback. This gives the force feedback a little bit of Ritalin, but without the dampening of personality. Amazing. We need to give this to doctors around the world. The biggest thing though will be that SIMUCUBE is all constantly being developed now. They're constantly adding stuff to it. It's in beta as it is now. It's public beta. Version 7.7a is the version we're using. That's a recommended version to use if you're looking to get it right now. But of course, it's just going to keep getting better. They're going to add more features to it, and they are listening. If you go to the Granity websites with the specific SIMUCUBE driver software, I'll put all the links to all the relevant stuff underneath this video for those of you looking to get it, as well as a link to the YouTube installation video. But they're listening to what people want. There's sort of active community behind it. Absolutely fantastic. Another really nice thing is you can export and import profiles, so it makes showing your profiles a lot easier. Technically, you could do that with the MMOS by just showing stuff around. They were just text files essentially, but this is all. It's just nice and clear. It's nice and clear. We're moving on up. Nothing can stop us. Now, final word in terms of the actual force feedback feel in iRACING. I have to say it does improve things quite a bit. I mean, the self-aligning is actually mental in iRACING. The sort of subtlety of the self-aligning, the actual suspension feel in iRACING is really good as well. You know, track texture, the curbing, and the really subtle suspension movements and what have you. Really amazing in iRACING, especially with the SIMUCUBE software. But there's still no real subtle front-end gradual understeer feel to emulate that force that you feel. If you go around a corner on a real racetrack, you can really feel if the front end is biting the circuit or not. Not from the audio, not from the visuals. You can just feel it in the G-forces. Maybe not through the wheel, but through your body. And it's really fundamental. This won't magically get you that in iRacing. It won't magically get you that in Project Cars 2. It does improve marginally the feel in Assetto Corsa for that. I haven't tested it in Race Room yet, so that'll be interesting to see. But yeah, it doesn't magically change or add something to the force feedback that hasn't been there before. It just improves what you had before and makes that feel more convincing, if that makes sense. Now, as I say, I've not tested this with all the simulators yet. It'd be really good if those of you that have the SIMUCUBE software and list what games you've tried it in and that it actually works in categorically, so we can get a good list going through here. Specifically if you've tested it with stuff like Grand Prix Legends, Dirt Rally, Dirt 4, maybe even some of the Codemasters games, some of the less simulator games. If you've had a chance to test it with those and you know it categorically works, it'd be nice for you to just put it in the comments. Saves me having to test it or find out embarrassingly before I go to stream that it doesn't work with a game we play. As I say, I've tried it. I know it works for sure in Race Room. I've tried it with AC, iRacing and Project Cars 2 briefly, so I know it works with them. But there you go, guys. There's not much more to say. I'm going to delve more into the SIMUCUBE software myself, fiddle around with it a bit more, look through it more, see what can improve things on the game side as well, and then we'll do some videos in terms of our force feedback settings. But this is definitely the way to go. If you're on the fence like myself, don't be worried about installing it. Go to that YouTube channel link in the description, use that, get it installed. You'll be happy. You'll be rubbing butter all over your face, enjoying that force feedback. And you know, direct drive wheel force feedback is just so good. It's so good. I can't wait for the price of direct drive wheels to come down and for more people to be able to experience it, because it's just so transformative of the experience of driving simulators. It literally turns driving sims into different games. It's so fundamental. It's you know, it's like being touched by God when you use the direct drive wheel while sim racing. Not that you have to get one. G25 is fine, but you know, if you want to be touched by God, you probably need one. That's all I'm saying. So, sorry for destroying your bank balances. Just forget what I said. As always, don't forget to subscribe if you like sim racing content. Hit the like button, and of course, remember we often stream after about 5 PM most evenings. Whenever I can get in the sim rig, whenever I can get online and drive, we're streaming. So subscribe for that and join in the chat room. We've got a Discord as well in the description. We've got Amazon links if you want to support us. We've got Fanatec links if you want to support us. You can just support us like a tortoise. Just support us. I will see you guys in the next video. Take care. Cups of tea for everyone. Goodbye.